28 minutes. That was the exact duration required to strangle Wilhelm Keitel on the Nuremberg gallows. He was the second highest commander in the military hierarchy, shaping orders for millions. Now, the Field Marshal hung in a makeshift execution chamber, constructed inside an ordinary prison gymnasium. The room measured roughly 10 by 30 meters, forcing witnesses to stand close to the violent spectacle. The trapdoor opened with a loud crack, but the fall failed to snap his neck. Instead, the heavy rope slowly choked the air out of him while he dangled above the floorboards. The quiet space amplified the wet sounds of asphyxiation echoing off the bare walls. For almost half an hour, his body convulsed at the end of the rope in a sustained physiological collapse. The witnesses stood in silence. A field marshal leans over a heavy desk. The steel nib scratches across the paper. The black ink dries fast. This single signature triggers midnight raids. The same hands from the scaffold drafted mass erasure. Keitel did not pull the trigger, just a pen. A sharp knock echoes in the dark. A French citizen opens his front door. Men in uniform drag him away. They push him into a vehicle. The engine idles. They drive away. No arrest warrants. No public trials. No witnesses. Just a sudden, silent disappearance. The victims vanish overnight. By April 1941, Keitel issued new criminal orders. The violence escalated rapidly. Then came the Night and Fog Decree. Keitel formalized the state terror. He signed the lethal document. The ink bound their fate. He erased people. The covert abductions swept through occupied territories. The geographical scale was staggering. Take Luxembourg. The entire country held under 300,000 residents. Yet the Gestapo raids hit France and Belgium. Norway and Denmark followed the same fate. Then the sweeps reached the Netherlands. In total, 7,000 civilians were dragged from their beds. The state weaponized bureaucratic silence. Families waited endlessly for letters. None arrived. Spouses begged the police for information. Local officials offered nothing. Relatives never learned the harsh truth. They waited forever. The missing vanished into secret interrogation centers. The captured endured endless questioning. Men vanished into windowless cells. Guards used severe physical torture. The interrogators broke their victims down. The paperwork moved them further east. Ultimately, the Reich shipped all 7,000 victims to vanish completely behind the fortified barbed wire of Gross Rosen and Natzweiler Struthof concentration camps. How did the Third Reich pay for the eradication of a neighboring nation's culture? They rewarded loyalty with direct bank transfers. 2 years before those night arrests across Western Europe, this identical military headquarters erased the Polish educated class. On September 1, 1939, the formal invasion commenced. By September 12, the administration expanded the liquidation registries. Clerks quietly typed the names of professors, lawyers, and physicians onto the extermination quotas. Firing squads executed thousands of civilian teachers and doctors in the forests. Meanwhile, the central bureaucracy secured lucrative financial payouts. Within 3 months, the occupation forces murdered 60,000 Polish citizens. The invaded country held 35 million people, and the leadership aimed to destroy their intellectual foundation completely. Field officers submitted detailed reports regarding the massacres, but headquarters deliberately buried the complaints. Crisp, newly printed banknotes rustled sharply during the private distribution of executive rewards. The Supreme Commander finalized the transaction with a personal bonus of 100,000 Reichsmarks. The highest military post in the nation went to an officer his peers openly considered a fool. That substantial cash bonus was simply the going rate for total submission to the Commander-in-Chief. In 1938, Wilhelm Keitel took over the newly formed German Armed Forces High Command. This new office replaced the old Ministry of War. He became the second most powerful military leader in the Reich. His colleagues watched in disbelief. Hermann Göring openly mocked the appointment. The Luftwaffe chief sneered that Keitel possessed a sergeant's mind inside a field marshal's body. Generals despised his incompetence. They frequently bypassed his desk entirely. They preferred speaking directly with the dictator. But this promotion was a calculated move. After the regime seized power in January 1933, secret rearmament surged across the country. Civilian sports leagues drilled infantry combat tactics. Glider clubs trained future fighter pilots using wooden aircraft. The state built a vast army from scratch. This expansion required compliant managers, not independent thinkers. Blind devotion held far more value than strategic genius. Keitel delivered exactly that. He offered obedience without hesitation. He signed death warrants without conscience. By 1941, the Supreme Command of the Armed Forces managed millions of soldiers across multiple fronts. This vast bureaucracy needed a quiet clerk at the top. Keitel fit the role perfectly. On September 1, 1939, German troops invaded Poland. An artillery officer secures his social standing. He stands at the altar. The bride is Lisa Fontaine. Her father runs the Wolfer Brewery. It is Europe's largest cooperative beer producer. The heavy scent of malt fills the estate. The wedding happens in April 1909. The road to supreme military command begins here. It starts in wealthy manors. It starts among commercial brewing vats. Wilhelm Keitel was born on September 22, 1882. The German Empire held 45 million citizens then. He suffered loss. His mother died. Grief bred order. He craved obedience. He entered the Prussian army. Rank provided immediate purpose. Ideology meant nothing. Status meant everything. The wealthy marriage delivered financial security. The couple raised 5 surviving children. Comfort surrounded their daily routine. He desired a quiet farmer's existence. Lisa demanded the high status of an officer's wife. Her ambition pushed him steadily upward. The countryside was left behind. The world fractured. On July 28, 1914, the First World War erupted across the entire European continent. Wilhelm Keitel bled in the muddy trenches of Flanders in 1914. But 10 years later, he hid an entire army inside bureaucratic reports. The military leadership retreated into the shadows of the Weimar Republic, deliberately constructing a bureaucracy designed for deep deception. By 1924, Keitel walked into the Ministry of Defense in Berlin and joined the Truppenamt. This shadow organization masked the outlawed German general staff through entirely mundane administrative titles. Officers sat behind ordinary wooden desks, disguising prohibited troop movements as statistical agricultural surveys and logistical planning as civilian infrastructure projects. This elaborate deception was born from the comfortable world of Prussian landowners shattering completely on November 11, 1918. Germany signed a humiliating surrender, accepting armistice conditions that stripped away exactly 13% of its sovereign territory. The victorious powers handed the highly industrialized regions of Alsace-Lorraine and West Prussia to foreign control. They simultaneously restricted the remaining German defense force to a strict limit of 100,000 soldiers. For the humiliated military elite, this diktat was never a permanent settlement, but an open wound demanding silent preparation for future revenge. Keitel approached this secret rearmament with the cold calculation he learned during the heavy artillery exchanges on the Western Front. Jagged shrapnel had torn through his flesh in those early battles, and the blinding physical pain stripped away his remaining illusions about battlefield glory. His superiors quickly pulled the recovering officer from the dirt and transferred him directly to the staff headquarters. He traded the chaotic roar of combat for the quiet predictability of ink, treating warfare strictly as a logistical equation. The paperwork flowed endlessly. He carefully reviewed the classified supply schedules for the next decade. The shadow bureaucracy operated without raising a single suspicion from foreign diplomats. Military planners mapped out factory production quotas under civilian disguises. His clerks quietly organized the deployment documents to expand the banned military forces. Who delivered the death sentence to the legendary Desert Fox? His own generals. The High Command finally turned its weapons against its own architects. The internal purge began quietly. Back in 1941, the Russian front claimed his youngest son, Hans Georg. The father drafted the invasion orders. The boy bled out in the dirt. By 1944, Adolf Hitler demanded much higher sacrifices. On July 20, 1944, a briefcase detonated inside the Rastenburg command barracks. The blast shattered heavy oak tables. Acrid smoke from the military-grade explosives choked the ruined room. Men screamed in the dark. Wilhelm Keitel stumbled through the debris. He grabbed a dazed Adolf Hitler by the arm. He pulled the dictator out of the burning ruins. That physical act guaranteed a blind loyalty. The Gestapo demanded blood for the betrayal. 4,980 people faced the executioner. Keitel presided over the military honor court. He stripped accused officers of their ranks. The army handed them over to civilian tribunals without protection. The executions wiped out the upper echelons. Then the leadership targeted Erwin Rommel. The general rested at his home in Herrlingen. 2 emissaries arrived from headquarters. They brought a stark ultimatum: stand before a rigged public court or swallow a cyanide capsule. The safety of his wife depended on a quiet exit. Rommel bit the glass vial. The poison worked in seconds. The Reich buried him with full military honors in Ulm on October 18, 1944. The public broadcast announced a fatal skull fracture from an enemy fighter plane attack. Soviet officers watched them across the table. It was May 8, 1945. The man who forced Rommel's suicide sat down. He commanded all German forces. The Soviets demanded his signature. They rejected the Rheims surrender. Keitel stared at the decisive document. The location was a shattered Berlin, specifically an officers' club in Karlshorst. He picked up the pen. He signed. The war ended. 16 months passed in the ruins of Europe. Nuremberg became the center for international justice. 216 court sessions followed the initial indictment. The proceedings lasted for 10 grueling months. 21 defendants attended the historical trial. Keitel took his seat in the dock. He faced 4 massive charges. October 1, 1946. The judges delivered their final verdicts. 12 men received a death sentence. Keitel was one. He lost. Guilty on every single count. Crimes against peace, conspiracy, war crimes, crimes against humanity. His defense strategy remained simple. He claimed strict military obedience. I was merely a serving soldier. I just followed superior orders. The judges refused. They rejected this broken logic. The tribunal set a legal precedent, officially declaring that following superior orders could never justify the conscious commission of massive crimes. The United States military entrusted the execution of 10 high-ranking Reich officials to a man who had never hanged anyone. The former Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces High Command awaited death. An executioner with a completely fabricated biography stood ready. Keitel begged the International Tribunal for a firing squad. He wanted a soldier's death. The judges flatly refused. His actions stripped him of all martial honor. He would hang as a common criminal. Before dawn on October 16, 1946, the broken bureaucrat sat inside his cell. The prison chaplain offered the final sacrament. Keitel accepted the dry communion wafer. He tasted the frail bread on his tongue. Then he walked toward the gymnasium. Meanwhile, U.S. Army Sergeant John C. Woods tested the heavy wooden trapdoors. Woods volunteered for the duty in 1944. He submitted a resume claiming vast experience executing prisoners across Texas and Oklahoma. The Army needed a hangman. They accepted his word. Nobody checked a single official record. If they had checked, they would have uncovered a massive lie. The state of Texas abandoned the noose in 1923. They transitioned entirely to the electric chair for all state executions. Woods was exactly 12 years old during the last recorded Texas hanging. The man preparing the Nuremberg gallows possessed zero documented experience in judicial killing. 10 condemned Nazi leaders walked into the brightly lit gymnasium that morning. The amateur executioner waited by the crude wooden steps. He miscalculated the length of every single drop rope. He addressed 2 million dead soldiers from the wooden platform. The condemned man stood perfectly straight. He invoked a higher power. He declared loyalty to his fallen sons. He screamed a final oath to the fatherland. Sergeant Wood's incompetence guaranteed a catastrophic mechanical failure. The iron lever shifted. The hinges screamed. The wooden floor vanished. The executioner measured the square opening entirely wrong. It was too narrow for a human frame. A hollow, wet crack echoed against the stone walls. The field marshal's face smashed into the timber edge. Blood covered it. The drop lacked the required distance. His neck bone held completely intact. He plummeted into the suffocating darkness below. His limbs thrashed blindly. Violent convulsions shook the entire gallows structure. The thick rope bit into his throat. He kicked air. He desperately gasped for oxygen. Death refused to deliver him quickly. Pure, agonizing asphyxiation began. The Supreme Commander dangled like a slaughtered animal. His lungs begged. His body twisted. His muscles tore. The witnesses stood above him in complete silence. They listened to the frantic kicking below. The endless agony dragged on. 28 minutes. Guards finally cut the corpse down. They dragged the battered body away. Fire reduced his remains to gray ash. The river Isar cuts rapidly through Munich. That city birthed the party he served. Soldiers carried a simple urn to the riverbank. They poured his dust directly into the freezing current. The water dissolved him instantly. He received no formal burial. They carved no headstone. They erected no memorial statue. The damp earth swallowed his memory completely. A lifetime of ordering infinite destruction ended with total erasure at exactly 64 years old.